Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name's Rhiannon and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I plan on reading in March. Now, as you can tell by the thumbnail, I have a big stack of books here. That is because I am participating in REALMATHON this month, which, if you don't know, is a month-long readathon hosted by Cassidy over at Covers with Cassidy, and it's a points-based readathon where you can either gain points for your team by completing certain prompts, or you can take points away from another team by completing a different set of prompts. I will, of course, leave the link to the REALMATHON announcement video down below for you guys, so if you would like more information about this readathon, please do check that out. I will also have Cassidy's channel link down there as well, though I can imagine that most of you probably follow her already because she is just a fantastic booktuber that creates really unique and exciting content. But if you haven't checked out Cassidy before, then as I mentioned, the link to her channel will be in the description box. Now, this is actually my first time competing in REALMATHON. I've heard about it these last few years, but I thought it would be too complicated to try and participate in for some reason. However, I watched Cassidy's announcement video for this round and something just drew me in. I don't know if it's the fact that we have different teams or that the prompts seem manageable in a way to me, and I have managed to fit a lot of books that I own and that are on my physical TBR onto my REALMATHON TBR. You guys know I am trying to tackle my physical TBR this year, so a readathon with prompts that I can pull books from my shelves for is definitely a winner. Now, for this readathon we have 4 teams. I have pledged myself to Team Shadows. That is the one that called out to me from the announcement video, but I was definitely a little bit hesitant to commit, and so I've put it off for as long as possible, but I have made up my mind now. I'm joining Team Shadows, which I am so excited for. The hosts for Team Shadows are Mel from Melanie Reads and Lexie from Books with Lexie. They are both creators that I've been following for a long time. I really do enjoy all of their content and they are just so lovely, so that definitely has me even more excited to join this team. I will say I do have a big stack of books here. I may change out books throughout the month as well if I don't feel like reading what I have on my set TBR. This is just a load of books that I would like to get to this month if I can. I also have books on my Kindle that I would like to get to and on audio, so I don't have all of them here physically to show you, but the main prompts that I'm going to be focusing on for this readathon are my team prompts. And for Team Shadows I get extra points if I fulfill 3 prompts, and those prompts are to read a book with a predominantly black cover, to read a book with buildings on the cover, and to read a book featuring school settings. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of forget about the school setting element of Team Shadows, which I know is embarrassing of me, but I'm sure there will be a school setting in some of these at least. If not, I have fit a lot of books onto my TBR that fulfill the first 2 prompts. Saying that though, I feel like we should just jump into the TBR. I feel like I've covered everything about the readathon, and if you do think that you would like to know more, as I mentioned, I will have Cassidy's announcement video linked down below. The first book I've chosen to read for this readathon is one that I have been wanting to pick up for the longest time, and that one is Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I have heard nothing but amazing things about this book, you guys, and I've definitely been putting it off because of that hype, but I've gotten to the point now where I'm just desperate to read it. I want to know what this book is about. I know that there are trials in here as well, and if you know me, you guys know that that is a buzzword for me. And it also helps that this book is one of Cassidy's favourites, and that is the prompt that I will be using this for. I believe you can use up to 5 prompts for one book, but I'm just going to list out one. I can definitely fit this into other prompts as well, but I feel like that would just take way too long to explain. So this is the book I'm going to use for a Cassidy fave. I always go to Cassidy's channel for recommendations, especially for fantasy recommendations. This one is a fantasy romance, which is a genre that I have been diving into recently and have been loving, and I feel like you can't call yourself a fantasy romance girly if you haven't read this book yet, so that's why I've put it onto my TBR. I don't actually know too much about this one, to be honest with you guys. All I know is that we follow a human girl who was taken in by a vampire, and that she now needs to compete in some trials to prove herself in one way or another. The little snippet at the top says, "The Hunger Games meets vampires in this heart-wrenching epic fantasy romance of dark magic and bloodthirsty intrigue from best-selling author Carissa Broadbent." You can tell by the smile on my face that I'm just so excited to get to this one. I feel like this is going to be one of the first books that I read for this readathon as well, because as I mentioned, it's a Cassidy favourite, so I feel like that is very fitting. And REALMATHON actually starts on a Friday this month, so I feel like this would be a perfect book to start off the readathon and read throughout the weekend. And from what I've heard, once you pick this one up, you will not want to put it down. So I feel like that is going to be perfect. I am also thinking of weekly vlogging for REALMATHON, just because I've missed vlogging. I feel like these are some books that I'm really going to want to share my thoughts on with you guys, and I really do want to get immersed in this readathon and feel like I am part of the community, because I tend to shy away from doing things like that, and I don't know why, because the community is why I joined BookTube. So I do think I'm going to do that and document my thoughts on the books that I read throughout REALMATHON, so keep your eyes peeled. But yeah, this is going to be the first book on my TBR and I cannot wait to read it. The next book I plan on reading is one that I don't physically own, but I do have it on my Kindle, and that one is Blood and Steel by Helen Shearer. The prompt I'm going to be using this book for specifically is to read a book that was featured in a host REALMATHON video, and both Cassidy and Mel, who I've previously mentioned, have both mentioned this book in their TBRs. This is another one that I've just heard amazing things about. It is another fantasy romance book. As I mentioned, guys, I am in my fantasy romance era right now, and I believe that I actually got this book for 99p on a Kindle sale, and this is the perfect excuse to force myself to pick it up. Not that it would actually take that much forcing, to be honest with you guys, because I really do want to read it, but saying that, I don't actually know what it's about, so I will read you the synopsis for this one. It says, perfect for fans of the Bridge Kingdom, From Blood and Ash, and The Witcher, Blood and Steel is an epic romantic fantasy with enemies to lovers, slow burn spice, found family, and a sprawling world of magic and monsters. With her death foretold, Althea Zoltar only has 3 years to become what she's always dreamed of being, a warrior legend. Women are forbidden to wield blades, so she has trained in secret her entire life. Now racing against the clock, she fights to secure her place in the elite guild, charged with the protection of 5 kingdoms. The sparring and hazing of the new trainees border on deadly, but even more dangerous is her growing attraction to Wilder Hawthorne, her unwilling warrior chaperone. All around them, schemes are afoot and darkness looms. Will Althea pass the perilous initiation test and take her place as champion of Thesma, or will the invading evil snatch away her dream before it starts? And it just says here, if you like fierce, sword-wielding heroines and brooding, tortured heroes, you will devour this sexy, addictive fantasy adventure. I love all of those things, so you bet I'm gonna have a good time with this one. Thank you to Cassidy and Mel for also thinking along the same lines as me and putting this one on your TBR. This is one that I was actually planning to read in the same reading vlog as Serpent and the Wings of Night, so that may be a fantasy romance vlog for the start of REALMATHON, which I'm definitely here for. And from the synopsis and the hype alone, this will be one that I do prioritise and will probably read fairly quickly. The next book I plan on picking up is A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. I recently read the first book in the series, which is An Ember in the Ashes, and I fell in love with this, you guys. This is just another prime example of me putting off the first book in a series because I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by it, deciding on picking it up and flying through the first 2 books because I love them so much. This is the 3rd book in the Ember Quartet by Sabaa Tahir, which is a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy world featuring a war-torn community that has fallen on extremely bad times. In the first book we follow our main character Leia, who is a scholar, and one day in the middle of the night her brother is arrested for treason. Leia manages to flee the scene and she finds refuge with a slave rebellion. However, things don't go quite as she was hoping to, and she ends up being forced into the role of a slave, where she will be serving the commandant, who is the most bloodthirsty character that you could ever imagine. No one would ever want to willingly serve the commandant. She tortures her slaves, she eventually kills them, but with Leia being so desperate and with the thought of rescuing her brother being the only thought spurring her on, she does decide to take up the rebellion's offer to spy on the commandant. However, of course, if she's caught, she will be killed or worse, so it is a very deadly task for her to try and complete. We also follow another character in the first book called Elias, who is a mask, which is a soldier in this world, and throughout his life he has been trained to be uncaring, unfeeling, and loyal to the Empire. However, we see the torment in Elias because he's actually a really good person and he doesn't believe what he's being told by the people above him, and he doesn't agree with the fact that these slaves are just being tortured and killed for no apparent reason. Because of this, he's actually been thinking of deserting the army and fleeing the Empire. However, before he can do that, he is actually roped in to compete in some trials to determine who the new emperor of this land will be. And when Laia and Elias's paths ultimately collide, they find that their destinies are intertwined and that their choices and actions will rock the future of the very empire that they fear. I don't know if I've described that well. Hopefully I have. I'm sorry if it was quite long-winded, but because this is a multiple POV fantasy series, it is kind of hard to get across to you guys what this is about without spoiling it too much. All I'll say is that I have been listening to the audiobooks for this series and I can highly recommend. I have been loving my experience listening to the audiobooks. I just find them to be so compelling. The narrators do a fantastic job. We do have multiple narrators in here as well for the different characters, which definitely helps differentiate between them, and I just found that I've been a lot more connected to the characters and what's going on in the story by listening to the audiobooks. So I would highly recommend, if you couldn't tell already. This is the latest installment though, so I do want to prioritize this one this month. It doesn't really fit any of the team prompts, which is a bit of a shame, but it's one that I want to get to nonetheless. And as I don't have too many books on my TBR that I can listen to audibly, I felt like this was a good choice, and I'm just desperate to continue on with the series, so I don't need an excuse really. Before I forget, the prompt that I've chosen to go for this book is a special edition. This is the Fairy Loot exclusive edition of this series. Absolutely love them. I think they are stunning, and yeah, it just fits in well for REALMATHON with that prompt, but as I mentioned before, there will probably be a few more that I can use this for as well. The next book I plan on picking up is The Adventures of Amina AlSaafi by Shannon Chakraborty. This is the next book that I need to read for my Buzzwordathon TBR. If you guys haven't seen my video for Buzzwordathon, I will leave it linked up above and down below, but that one is a year-long readathon hosted by Kayla over at Books and Lala, where each month you will need to read a book that corresponds to that month's prompt. The prompt for March is to read a book featuring the character's name in the title, and of course in my case the name of the character is Amina AlSaafi. I will just read you the synopsis for this one because this is another one that I have a vague idea of what it's about, but I don't know 100%. So it just says here, Amina AlSaafi has survived backstabbing rogues, vengeful merchant princes, several husbands, and one actual demon to retire peacefully with her family to a life of piety, motherhood, and absolutely nothing that hints of the supernatural. But when she's offered a job no bandit could refuse, she jumps at the chance for one final adventure with her old crew that will make her a legend and offers a fortune that will secure her and her family's future forever. Yet the deeper Amina dives, the higher the stakes, for there's always risk in wanting to become a legend, to seize one last chance at glory, to savour just a bit more power, and the price might be your very soul. So the fact that this is a female-focused pirate story definitely has me intrigued. I'm very excited to read this one. For those of you who don't know, I do love books set at sea, and the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise is one of my favourite ever franchises. I love those films just because of how much I love the sea and pirates in general. So the fact that we get a book where the main character is a female pirate, I am just here for. This is also one that does have a black cover. I believe that Cassidy said that 50% of the cover had to be your team's colour, and I feel like this counts. Let me know if you don't think that it does, but I'm gonna count it for now. I don't think it has a school setting, and I can't see any buildings on the cover, which is a bit of a shame, but nevertheless, I'm very excited to get to this one, and I'm even happier that I managed to get it onto my REALMATHON TBR because this was a required read for this month anyway. The prompt I'm using for this book could either be a special edition. This is another Fairy Loot edition, but I do think I'm going to use it as a book that I paid for because Fairy Loot is a subscription that I pay for monthly, and with this being part of that subscription, I feel like that definitely does count. The next book that I would like to read is another one that I don't own physically, and that one is A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal. This is a very new release that I am definitely looking forward to reading. The prompt that I'm going to be using for this book is that it was in another host REALMATHON video, and the video that I saw it mentioned in was Tori's video from Tori Between Pages. She recently posted her March TBR, and what would you know, this one was there. So thank you, Tori, for mentioning this one. I am planning on listening to the audiobook for this one as I don't own it physically. I have seen it available on BookBeat, which is a new app that I'm trialing at the minute to see whether I enjoy it. So I am glad to have another audiobook to listen to. This also has a predominantly black cover, and it does have buildings on the cover as well, which is another bonus point. This is one that's actually actually been on my radar for a while. I think I first heard of it when the cover was revealed, and then every time I've gone to browse on Waterstones' website it has popped up, but I had a feeling that it may be in a subscription box. However, it turns out that it's not in the box that I thought it was going to be, and it's in one that I'm not actually subscribed to. So I'm going to listen to the audiobook, and if I do like it I will buy myself a copy. But I am pretty annoyed that I didn't pre-order it because the Waterstones exclusive edition is gorgeous, and I'm really going to regret not getting it if I do end up loving this one. Because I don't own it physically, I will just read you the synopsis off of Goodreads. It says, on the streets of White Roaring, REALMATHON Cassidy is a criminal mastermind and collector of secrets. Her prestigious tea room transforms into an illegal bloodhouse by dark, catering to the vampires feared by society. But when her establishment is threatened, REALMATHON is forced to strike an unlikely deal with an alluring adversary to save it, and she can't do the job alone. Calling upon a band of misfits, REALMATHON formulates a plan to infiltrate the dark and glittering vampire society known as Athurium. But not every member of her crew is on her side, and as the truth behind the heist unfolds, REALMATHON finds herself in the midst of a conspiracy that will threaten the world as she knows it. I definitely should have pre-ordered this book, you guys, because that sounds incredible. Who knew that I'd be reading vampire books this month, guys? I did that unintentionally, but I am also extremely glad that I did, because I love vampires. I have ever since Twilight, even though they are questionable portrayals of vampires. I like the darker, grittier, bloodthirstier vampires, so hopefully I do get that from this book. I love that we have a criminal underground as well, and that we will hopefully have some sort of a found family element. So thank you to Tori once again for featuring this in a video. I'm really happy to have fit it onto my TBR, and I'm hoping that it is one that I do end up really enjoying. The next book I would like to get to is The Fury by Alex Michaelides, and I'm using this for the prompt of reading a book with an isolated setting. I actually own a few of Alex Michaelides' books, but I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't read a single one yet. This one has just recently been released though, and it's one that I've been drawn to for some reason. It may be the fact that it's a thriller with an isolated setting. That is always something that I do gravitate towards, but I think it's also because of the reviews. I feel like they are quite divisive, and I'd like to see where I stand. So in this one we are following 7 characters who are trapped on an island, and what would you know, one of them is murdered. And it just says here, but nothing on this island is quite what it seems. Not Lana, not her guests, certainly not the murderer furiously plotting their crime. But who am I? My name is Elliot Chase, and I'm going to tell you a story unlike any you've ever heard. So the synopsis doesn't give too much away, but I do quite like that. I don't like knowing too much about my thrillers before diving into them, so I am looking forward to see what happens in this one. The fact that we are on a Greek island as well, which is something that I haven't mentioned, but this is set in Greece, is another factor that just made me want to pick this up, because I love Greece. I visited Kos last summer, and yeah, it's just one of the most beautiful places. So we have an idyllic, isolated setting with a murderer on the loose, and honestly that just has me sold. So hopefully I do enjoy this one, and this could also potentially work for the prompt of reading a book in one sitting, because I feel like this is one that I will just sit down and fly through. I tend to enjoy my thrillers a lot better that way as well, so keep your eyes peeled for this in a vlog. But I think it'll be a nice change of pace to have a thriller on my TBR as well, because I did try and fit some in, however I wanted to prioritise more of my fantasy books, so I think a change in pacing will definitely do me some good. And yeah, this is the thriller that was calling out to me at the time of choosing the books for this TBR. Now I've gone a bit rogue with this next book, you guys, and you're probably going to be shouting at me for including this one on this month's TBR, because I've chosen to go for the Well of Ascension, which is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy, and it is over 800 pages. Now what am I thinking putting an 800 page book onto a TBR? Honestly, I have no idea. It's just the fact that I have read the first book not too long ago. It was a reread for me, but I've never carried on with the rest of the books in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, and this year I have made it a goal to do so. This is the next book that I of course need to read, and for some reason I've chosen to put it on a readathon TBR. Now I will say I did fly through the first book, whether that be because I have already read it, I'm not too sure, but I would love to dive into this one and read it before I start to forget minor details from that first book, but I am slightly regretting that decision at this current point in time. I can't tell you too much about this book in particular because it is the second book in a series, but in the first book we follow our main character Kelsia, who is trying to start a Scar rebellion in order to overthrow the final empire and the Lord Ruler in particular. Now the Lord Ruler seems to be an immortal, unkillable being, however Kelsia has recently found out something that may be able to defeat him, and so he's going around the different Scar plantations to try and incite riots. The Scar are people who have been oppressed their whole lives. They are treated worse than slaves, and so it is difficult to get them to want to stand up for themselves and to fight for a better life for themselves and their families, and we follow Kelsia's struggles as he does try to recruit them to his cause. Now along the way he does find some people to help him, and that includes a young girl called Vin. Now in this world people are able to ingest different metals, and based on the metal that you ingest you are able to harness an ability. Most people can only ingest one specific metal, however Kelsia and Vin are both Mistborn, meaning that they can ingest all 8 metals and harness their abilities. This is another element that makes Kelsia think that he will be able to defeat the Lord Ruler, and we see him and Vin and a few more characters come together to plan out a heist that will hopefully end the Lord Ruler's rule forever. This is another series that I feel like I can never describe too well, so I do apologise if I didn't do that justice, but there's a lot going on in these books, you guys. They are adult high fantasy books with a lot of politics involved, though it is a very easy world to fall into, which is why I have put this one onto my TBR, because I do feel like once I sit down to read it I will just fall back into this world, I'll get immersed in it, and I really do want to see what is going to happen, because I feel like the first book could be a standalone if you wanted it to be, so I'm definitely intrigued to see where the story goes from here and what is actually going to happen. The prompt that this one fits is to read a book with an even amount of letters in the title, and even though it's not a black cover and it's not a school setting, we do have buildings on the cover, which at least fills one of the prompts. The next book that I would like to get to is The Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden. This again has a black cover all the way around, so I feel like it counts. We also have a building there, if you can see that. And the prompt I'm going to use this one for is to read a book that was published before 2018. Luckily for me, this one came out in 2017, so right on the cusp, but I'm really glad that it counted, because this is the second book in a trilogy, with that trilogy being the Winter Night trilogy. Book 1 is of course The Bear and the Nightingale. It's one that I read last month, and it's another series that I would like to continue on with. I'm honestly not going to tell you too much about book 1 because I feel like it's a really difficult book to describe. All I'll say is that it's an extremely atmospheric book. It's a polar fantasy book set in Russia, and we follow our main character who is expected to conform to society's rules. However, she is more comfortable out in the forests living with magical creatures. This is definitely a series that I would recommend going into without really knowing too much. It's what I did, and I fell in love with the world and the writing and the atmosphere, as I mentioned, in particular. So I would like to carry on with the series and see where our characters have ended up in this one, because again, the first book could have been a standalone for me, but I am intrigued enough to see where our main characters are going from there and how they fare in book 2. This could also work for the prompt of reading an exclusive edition. This is another Fairy Loot edition, surprise surprise, but yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. I really do love it, and I can't wait to continue on with the series because I really did enjoy the first one. And you'll be happy to know, guys, that we have finally made it to the last book, and that one is Capturing the Devil by Carrie Maniscalco. Now, if you've been keeping up with my TBRs, you may have seen this one quite a few times. I cannot make myself sit down and read this, guys. I don't know why, because it's a book that I feel like I'm going to absolutely love once I actually start it, but the fact is I'm not starting it, and so I keep putting it off. But this is the 4th and final book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco, which is a book series that focuses on different individuals that we know of from history. This book in particular is focused on H.H. Holmes, who, if you don't know, was a prolific serial killer that was responsible for creating the Murder Castle or Murder Hotel. If you've watched American Horror Story Hotel, it's based off of H.H. Holmes and what he did. And it just says here that our main characters begin their investigations only to find themselves facing a serial killer unlike any they've encountered before. Identifying him is one thing, but capturing him, especially within the infamous murder hotel he built as a confusing and terrifying torture lair, is another. Will our main character see her final mystery to its end, or will she fall prey to her most cunning adversary yet? I don't want to say too much again because this is the last book in a series. We follow a set of characters that I don't want to mention in case it somehow spoils the first couple of books for you, but I feel like I've just been putting this one off because I didn't love the third book as much as I thought I would. I really loved the first two. The third book was a letdown, and so I have been scared to dive into this one. I'm also scared because I'm very much into my true crime. I have researched a lot into the H.H. Holmes case, and so to see it tackled in a fantasy book just puts me on edge a little bit. I don't know why, but either way, I would love to finally read the last book in this series, which is why I've ultimately put it onto my TBR. This is another book with buildings on the cover, so it does count for an extra team prompt. But honestly guys, if you see this in another TBR, I swear I will scream, because I should have read this 1 month ago. I keep putting it off, but I'm hoping that this is the month where I actually read it and finish out a series that I have really enjoyed. So there we have it guys. These are all of the books that I'm planning on reading for REALMATHON, as well as Blood and Steel and A Tempest of Tea, which I don't physically own. It's definitely a lot, but I'm excited for each and every single one. I feel like I have a good mix of genres here as well, so that hopefully means that I won't get too slumpy. As I mentioned though, if I'm not feeling like reading any of these books, or if I want to change out the books that I will be reading for REALMATHON, then that is completely fine. This isn't set in stone, but it just gives you a rough idea of what I'm in the mood for and which prompts work for which types of books. I did manage to read 9 books in February, so I'm hoping that I can actually tackle this TBR and finish off the majority of the books. I also have some on my Kindle and some audiobooks that I can use, so I really do think that this will be a good reading month for me, and just looking at this stack is making me excited to start REALMATHON. Please do let me know down in the comments if you're taking part in REALMATHON, and if you are, let me know which team you have pledged yourself to. I'm really happy that I decided to join this year. I'm just so excited to start reading, as I've mentioned, and I can't wait to join sprints and just be immersed in the booktube community as much as I can. So if you actually have a TBR video that you filmed, please do let me know that as well so I can check it out. I'm always wanting to find new creators and to find new book recommendations, and I feel like TBRs are some of the best videos to do that. If you have made it this far through into the video and would like to let me know that you're still here, please go ahead and leave me a snake emoji down in the comments. The first book that I showed you is of course the Serpent and the Wings of Night, and it does have a snake on there as well, so I feel like that is pretty fitting, and it's also a Cassidy fave who is the host of REALMATHON. So if you don't have anything in particular that you would like to say, but you would like to let me know that you're still here, please go ahead and comment that now. As well as that, please don't forget to click the like button if you like this video and the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content from me. But that is it from me today guys. Thank you so much for watching, good luck for REALMATHON, and I will see you soon in my next video. Goodbye!